You know what Republicans say at the Capitol all the time? Well, we can't ban abortion because the court will strike it down. So we won't even try. I mean, what if we were to actually pass a ban on abortion? And then, yes, it had to go through the courts, but maybe there was an abortion clinic that was shut down for a month or two.
Recently, in Portland, Oregon, Antifa went, attacked a church group, and threw all their equipment in the river, and the police just stood there and didn't do anything.
Our sheriff here in Tulsa County, Sheriff Regalado, he and I have had many good conversations about this, and we've talked about empowering the county sheriff to do more. And one thing that I'm looking at doing, I haven't filed this bill yet, so I haven't announced it, I will later, but I'm going to recreate the posse system and allow sheriffs to be able to deputize individuals, you know. I mean, some of these counties only have a couple of deputies, you know, for a huge county that they have to cover. And if they need to be able to call upon the citizens to deal with Antifa or other thugs or whatever, yes, have at it. Now, it's not just going to be willy-nilly. We'll put in some sort of training or some sort of stipulations or some of that stuff, you know.
This is Lori Gracie. She's the vice president of Tulsa 912, and I'm going to tell you something. She rocks. She's on vacation this week. Her sister is in town from Tennessee, and so we are very blessed to have Lori. The great emails that are coming out. She's done it, even the ones that don't tell you where the meeting is or what time it starts. But I'm the one that get the emails that go, hey, where is this going to be? So hang on, and here's Lori.
It's fun. Let's give it up for Rhonda, because I tell you there would be no 912 without Rhonda. She's my hero. So we are blessed with her leadership and all that she's done for the Tulsa community, for Oklahoma, when you get right down to it. And somebody that Rhonda loves to brag about, if you've ever been around Rhonda, she likes to talk about her state senator and all the wonderful things that her state senator has done for this state. He is the most conservative state senator in the state of Oklahoma. He's been influential in affecting legislation, not just here, but across the country. We have him to thank for our constitutional carry. We have him to thank for having the very first no red flag law in the nation. Give it up for that. No red flag law. And so it is my great honor and great privilege to introduce to you our state senator, Nathan Dahm.
Well, good evening, everyone. Lori, thank you for that. Rhonda, thank you for everything you do. Yes, I remember when Rhonda first started the Tulsa 912 project. It was quite a bit ago, over a decade, probably over 12 years ago when it was first started. So we've been in the grassroots, in the trenches, in this governmental sphere for a long time, trying to fight to protect our rights. And we've had a lot of battles. We've had some good victories. We've definitely had some losses along the way as well. But it's been a wild ride, and it's definitely not over yet. Always an honor to be with you here at the 912 Project. Thank you for all of you that have been so involved, but thank you for the new people that are getting involved as well. It's great to see new people coming out and getting informed and engaged, because that's a part of the process. So I want to hit on a few things, but those of you that have heard me speak before, you know I prefer to answer questions because I want to talk about what you are actually interested about. So be thinking about questions. If nobody wants to be the first one, Rhonda will. She'll be the first one. If nobody else will, we all know that she'll have a good question for us. So I'll definitely hit on that. But before I do, I will of course mention my wife is here with me tonight, Christina. So we're calling this our honeymoon tour. We actually did go on a honeymoon, and I know several of you came to our wedding reception. Several of you gave us wonderful gifts. Thank you for everyone that was involved with that and has been involved in my life and our life for all this time. But I always want to recognize her because she's been traveling around the state with me. I think one Saturday, because we've only been married a little over 2 months now, and one Saturday we spoke in Duncan for lunch and in Lawton for dinner, and so we've been traveling the state. So we're calling this our honeymoon tour, so it's fun. I also have my mom here, or at least she was. I don't know where. Oh, there she is. Okay, she's here as well, next to who considered my second mom also, who helped raise me and everything. So a lot of family friends here in the crowd. But I also have to recognize Representative Stearman. I know she's going to be upset that I'm pointing her out. So everybody, look in the back at her. She actually was just at a conference with me, a conference of Liberty legislators. It is a very select group of people, and it used to just be me from Oklahoma, but now we have Representative Stearman there as well. She's doing a phenomenal job, just her first year in the legislature, fighting for liberty. She truly gets it. She understands it. I know she's been giving other people copies of the law as well, trying to educate them on it, which I've done that for years. In fact, I sent her son a copy of the law when he was first, was it when he was first deployed or when he just first had entered, when he was doing his basic training? I sent him a copy of that and a pocket constitution. So I'm a strong believer in individual rights, as you all know. So I'm going to hit on that a little bit, and then I'll open it up for questions, talk about what you all want to talk about. I know there's a lot of questions out there. I know there's talks about special session, there's redistricting, there's a lot of things going on right now. I know Lori had asked about McGirt decision, so we could talk about that. So whatever people have questions, I'll be happy to answer those. But first, I just want to give a quick overview on the Constitution, on the Declaration, on these founding documents. And I will put a little plug in here. If you haven't seen it, I have been doing videos on the Declaration of Independence. I started something that I'm calling the founding documents in around 5 minutes. Some of them are a little under, some of them are right up to the 6-minute mark, 5.5 minutes, but it's a pretty easy watch so that you can share that with family and friends, put it on your Facebook or on their Facebook page. And so I'm breaking it down, and the Declaration's probably going to end up being about 7 parts total to cover that. The first part, I just talk about the intro to the Declaration. In this most recent one, I talked about some of the list of abuses that are in the Declaration. There's actually 27 paragraphs, lines, items that the Founding Fathers use as examples for the tyranny of King George. And they say, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And they go line by line on all the violations of the rights that they had, that their king, that their government was violating. And that's one thing that I try to emphasize and help people to realize. I'm not advocating for a revolution. I'm not advocating for civil war, but I know there's a lot of people talking about that they say that it's impossible for us to continue down this path where one side believes that the other side shouldn't have access to be able to go buy groceries or to be able to go into restaurants, or, there's a concerted effort by the media to separate us into separate classes. And that is the Marxist playbook. They try to separate us into different classes, whether it's by race. And if you don't believe that the media wants a race war, you're not paying attention to what the media is saying, because they are trying to divide us by race. Why are they doing that? Well, because you can look at somebody else and see, hey, we have different colors of skin, right? Everybody does that. Now, if you judge somebody based on the color of their skin, that's what makes you a racist. But they want you to look at other people and judge them based on the color of their skin because they want a race war. Part of the reason that they're forcing these masks, if you look at the scientific studies behind masking, there's not a whole lot of evidence showing the effectiveness of it. Now, again, it should be an individual choice, just like the vaccines should be an individual choice. But one reason that they're pushing for some of the mask stuff is because that's an easily identifiable way of being able to separate people, right? Same thing even with the social distancing. 6 feet social distancing, if somebody's in your bubble, in your space, well, then they should be considered a different class. So we're seeing this Marxist ideology of separating people into different classes and trying to cause this division. But when we look at the Declaration of Independence, what a lot of people don't realize is that that was actually the first Civil War. We talk about the Civil War that happened in the late 1800s, and people say we could refer to that as the Civil War. But if you actually look at the Declaration of Independence and what happened then, that was a civil war, because those were British subjects fighting their own British government. That was the British government, the King of Great Britain, who sent mercenaries. He hired German mercenaries to come and to confiscate the firearms from his own people, from British subjects. We all, know the story of Paul Revere because it was made famous by a poem, and we've learned that through history. But Paul Revere was not saying the British are coming. The British are coming. He was saying the regulars are coming, meaning the British military is coming, because they were British. They considered themselves British. They were British citizens. And here they had their own government fighting against them, trying to take away their rights, trying to confiscate their firearms. If you read through that list of those 27 abuses in the Declaration of Independence, you'll see that they talk about how he made judges dependent upon the king alone, how he dissolved the legislative branches, or how he moved them to faraway distances so it was hard for them to actually be able to pass laws that were necessary for the people. And they go through 27 of these items. They actually had 29, but 2 of them were removed. One of which, the longest provision, a lot of people don't know this, the longest provision in the Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration of Independence was saying that he has forced upon these colonies slavery. Jefferson actually had in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence an objection to slavery because it was the king that was forcing it upon them. They tried to change it in their legislatures and the king wouldn't allow it. He was forcing slavery upon them. But 2 of the colonies objected to that, and they struck it out because if you read the very beginning of the Declaration, what does it say? It says the unanimous declaration. They agreed that every item had to be unanimous. So there was 27 items that they said, yes, we agree that the King of Great Britain is doing all of these things to all of our people and all of our subjects. So we're going to come together united, and we're going to object to what he's doing to us. And so we ended up with that list of 27 items. So I'm doing those videos on the Declaration of Independence. The current one is talking about some of those violations. But in the one that comes out next Monday, I've been releasing them on Monday nights. One thing that I encourage people to do is to look at that list of those 27 abuses and see how many of them our current governments are doing to us. Whether it's the federal government, the state government, or local government, mayors. Look at it and you'll see that the problem that we have in government is we have too many people that look at their role as that we are their subjects, like King George, that they have this divine right, that they have this idea that they are our betters, that they are entitled because they have a title. Whether it's senator, representative, mayor, or whatever it might be, they feel entitled because they have that title. And they don't understand the proper, true reason for government. And the Declaration of Independence lays that out. We've all heard, and we all know the phrase from the Declaration, that we're endowed by our Creator. First of all, we need to realize that we're endowed by our Creator with certain rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We all know life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We hear that all the time. But it says that we're endowed by our Creator. We're not endowed by government with certain rights, because if government grants you rights, government can take it away. No, God gives us our right to life. Okay, government doesn't give us life, do they? No, God gives us life. God is the creator of life. Governments don't give us liberty. God gives us liberty. Governments generally infringe upon our liberty. Governments don't give us happiness. Happiness comes from God. Governments tend to infringe upon our happiness with their excessive regulations and everything else, right? So we have to understand that it comes from our Creator first and foremost. But then it goes on and it says that we're endowed from our Creator with those rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So why are governments instituted? To secure these rights. That is the main purpose and function of government. It's to protect our rights. Whether it's the school board, whether it's the U.S. president, whether it's the Supreme Court, whatever level of government they are at, their proper function should be to protect our rights. But I can tell you, having served in the legislature for 9 years now, having dealt with the judiciary, having dealt with mayors and many other elected officials, the vast majority of them do not see it that way and do not understand that. That's why it's so important for people like you to be here, because some of you are my constituents, but the majority of you are not. Most of you live in other Senate seats or House seats, so you have to help to educate your representatives and your senators about this fact, that their responsibility, being in government service, is to serve the people by protecting their rights, not figuring out how to spend the money. That's what most of them think, not figuring out how to protect us from ourselves, because they all think they know what's best. They all think they know how you should live your life. And I can tell them how they should live their lives, but I'm not going to. No. We all have our opinions on that, right? But they don't understand the proper function of government. And so we have to educate them on that. And if you look at the Constitution and the way it's laid out, it is a wonderful document that has that balance of powers that we often talk about. But oftentimes we don't understand the difference between that word power and that word right. Because one thing that we often say, as those in the grassroots, as those that are conservatives, we often talk about states' rights. I used to use that terminology, right? Hey, I'm a believer in states' rights. But you can't find that terminology in the Constitution or, in the Declaration, because states don't have rights. Only individuals have rights. States have powers. And if you read both the Declaration and the Constitution, you will see that it talks about the powers. Whenever it talks about that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, it says deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. The people, those who are governed, consent and give power to the government to operate on their behalf in certain areas. It's not unlimited power. It is very limited scope of power. In fact, in the Constitution, it says we're going to empower the federal government to do a few things. They can do post offices and post roads. They do a terrible job at it, but they can do it. It is constitutional, okay? They can do the military, which we have a great military in this country, but there's a lot of waste in the military too. They do a pretty poor job with a lot of that stuff. I personally have not served, but pretty much every veteran that I've already talked to has said that yes, that is a problem. There's a lot of waste in the military. So I'm not bashing the military. I'm just saying that the government doesn't do a great job with how they spend the money in those things. But we have very limited authority that we've given to the federal government. They can do bankruptcies. They can do weights and measures. They can do the currency. There are certain things that have to be uniform. Outside of that, everything else was supposed to be reserved to the states or to the people. And that's what we've gotten so far away from, is that they don't have an understanding that the power resides in the people. One thing that's very interesting in the Declaration of Independence is that it talks about how King George has actually dissolved the legislative bodies. He actually dissolved their legislature. That would be like the governor, which our governor wouldn't do this. Mary Fallin might have, but our current governor wouldn't have, actually dissolving it and say that I could no longer be in the legislature. Wendy Stearman can no longer be in the legislature. Just entirely eliminating the legislature. Well, that's a tyrant. That's what they were saying that King George was, that he was a tyrant by doing these things, because he was eliminating their right to representation. But what it's interesting that it says in the Declaration, it says that right cannot be annihilated. It cannot be eliminated. It basically, but what they say is that it falls back to the people. That right can't be eliminated. It just falls back to the people, because the people have the rights. And so if we as the people say, well, we're going to empower the legislature to operate on our behalf, that doesn't mean we're giving up that right. We're just extending it to them. And if they abuse it, if the king tries to eliminate it, it falls back on us. Same thing with, thankfully, we have a Second Amendment in our Constitution. It says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay? That right is not given to us by the government. It's not even given to us by the Constitution. It's protected by the Constitution, but the right to self-defense is given to us by God. And if they were to somehow amend the Constitution and remove that from the Constitution, you still have an inherent right to self-defense, whether or not a piece of paper says that. that right would devolve back to the people, even if they were to eliminate it somehow from the Constitution. Thank goodness we have it in the Constitution. It's the one thing that has separated us from every other country on the planet, and the reason that we are still so free, even with this almost total communist Marxist takeover that is taking place in almost every institution in this country, we still have the right to defend ourselves. And that's one reason why things haven't gotten as terrible as they have in other countries. And I know, I've experienced it. We moved over to a formerly communist country. It was still very communist at the time. The communist leaders were still in power and in control. They just deposed the dictator. That was about the only change. So I've experienced firsthand what happens with socialism and communism. That's why I've been fighting this fight for so long, because I've seen where we can go. And thank goodness for so many of you getting involved in it too. One advantage to things that are happening now is I think more and more people are starting to awaken and wake up to what can take place and what can happen. And that's one of the challenges that I've had over my years at the legislature. I could give example after example of a bill that I filed that I was told, oh, we don't need that, that's unnecessary. 3 years later, lo and behold, wow, who could have foreseen that this was going to happen? We need that bill. Yeah, that's why I tried to do that. And I'm not even saying necessarily just on individual rights. I had a bill that would have put caps on if the Attorney General's office used outside counsel, if they hired lawyers to defend, or to go to court on behalf of the state, there was a cap on how much money those lawyers can make off of that verdict. Well, they told me we don't need that. We actually have that in our rules. Well, we got a new Attorney General who did away with those rules, and then there was the opioid settlement in which a local firm got tens of millions of dollars in the settlement. Well, that money is supposed to be going to the people that were harmed by the opioid crisis that was caused by the pharmaceutical companies that were knowingly, intentionally lying to the people about how addictive their product was, but instead it went to those lawyers. Well, now after the fact, we got that bill passed, but if it would have been done beforehand, that money would have been able to go to the people to help at least address that problem a little bit more. But the problem is that in the legislature, there's no real advantage to being ahead of the curve. Because if you solve a problem before it happens, you can't take credit for it on your next re-election campaign, because the problem never happened, right? Whereas if a problem happens and then you come in to swoop in to fix it, you can claim credit for it. Let me give you an example. How many of you have tried to renew your driver license recently? Isn't that a wonderful government-created problem? But guess what? They created a solution. So now they have these super sites where you can go and you can get it done very quickly and everything. All because they implemented Real ID, okay? Now, we had a prohibition in Oklahoma saying we would not comply with Real ID because it was a federal law and the federal government had no constitutional authority to require Real ID. So we had a prohibition on it for years. And actually, I was able to keep it killed in the Senate for about 4 years. Finally, they figured out what I was doing. So they went around me and they decided to fix the Real ID problem. Because if we don't fix the Real ID problem, we won't be able to board airplanes come October of 2017, which got pushed to October of 2018, which got pushed to October of 2019, and October of 2020, and October of 2021, and October of 2022. This is such a pressing and such a pressing issue that they passed back in 2003. Was it 2005? I thought it was 2003. I think it was, yeah, but anyways, 15, 16, 18 years ago, it was so important that an entire generation of people have been born and are now getting driver licenses without it actually being implemented, because the government had to come up with a solution. And that's part of the problem, is so much of what I hear at the Capitol is we have to do something. Not the right thing, not we have to protect the rights of the people. It's we have to do something. And why is that? So that they can show they did something. Because you can put something on your mailers, You can put something on your website, but you can't put nothing on your website. You can put, like I do, and say, hey, I've fought to protect your rights. I've stopped the government from infringing upon your rights. But that doesn't sell as well as, hey, I did something. And so that's what we're up against, because the vast majority of the people up there, as good-hearted as a lot of them are, and maybe even as well-intentioned as many of them are, they don't understand that. They look at it as they always have to be thinking about their next election. If you've heard me speak before, I often use this quote from a pastor who was also a philosopher in the late 1880s. This was he had served in the Civil War, and he said the difference between a politician and a statesman is a politician is always looking out for their next election. A statesman is always looking out for the next generation. And we have too many politicians and not enough statesmen at every level of government. That's why we need more people to get involved who have a better understanding of the proper role of government. And so, it's an honor for me to serve in that capacity, to continue in this fight. I can give you example after example of the issues that we face at the state capitol. We have good people in the fight. I will say AFP, I see Adam in the back. They do a great job of being supportive of the deregulation and protecting people's rights and business policy and those types of things from that conservative perspective of not doing business handouts to special interest groups, but actually trying to make an equal playing field and actually just lowering regulation. So there are good groups that are doing some of this stuff, but it is a big battle. And I can go into all the insider baseball of how things happen, but I will tell you, I don't care who gets the credit, and I've told this to Senate leadership. I don't call them Senate leadership anymore because they don't lead. I call them the Senate Central Committee. For those of you that know your history, you can infer what that means. I've told this to those who are in charge of the Senate, and I don't care who gets the credit. I care about good policy. A perfect example of that is constitutional carry. I had to fight them all the way through to actually force a vote on it. They did everything they could to stop it. Finally, we voted on it. Governor Fallin vetoed it. Next year, we came back, and they said, all right, we're going to pass it again because it was an election year and too many people made commitments that we're going to do it, and it passed overwhelmingly, and it's actually pretty popular in Oklahoma, so we're going to do it. But Nathan, your name can't be on it. We're going to have somebody else do it. And I said, we're getting constitutional carry, fine by me, go for it. Interestingly enough, when it passed, all the reporters and everybody else was contacting me because they knew I had carried it for so long. So that even when they try to take away the credit, sometimes that backfires on them. But yeah, Piers Morgan, yeah, he didn't. Yeah, I was in that battle for a long time with him. So another example is Senate Bill 658. You might be hearing about this recently. That's the bill that would prohibit forcing children to wear masks in schools. Children are one of the least, at danger with this. So we put those protections in. Well, I had that bill, Senate Bill 658. It was a scaled down version. It actually even wasn't dealing with masks at that point in time or vaccines. It also has a prohibition on vaccine passports in it now. But I passed it through the Senate. It went over to the House, came back, and I had essentially been told by those in charge of the Senate, the Senate Central Committee, that they would no longer hear any bills with my name on it. So I gave that bill over to a different senator and said, hey, use this, because he has kids in school. He was seeing it. I'm like, I'll help however I can, but we'll take my name off of it, put your name on it. And he worked, and the very last day we actually finally got Senate Bill 658 passed. But it was a team effort, and so there's things like that happens behind the scenes that people don't really know of what takes place. But that's what we're up against. The majority of the people up there are looking out either for their next election or some other paid position or whatever the case might be. It's unfortunate, but we just need better people in those offices, in those positions. So with that, Dave, I saw your hand. You get the first question. Oh wait, no, Rhonda first. Oh, perfect. So if you didn't hear that, when you ask your question, they want you to ask it into the microphone so everybody can hear, and we'll get it in the mic on the recording as well. Yeah, and she's going to hold the microphone. Nobody else gets it. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you for everything that you've been doing. The 658 has come under attack. Saw a news article saying there's already a school district saying that they will implement the mask mandates in their school district. What does the law have in it as teeth where we can go after these people?
Unfortunately, because we kept working to try to get something through with 658, the best we could do was prohibiting masks for students and prohibiting vaccine passports at the university and at the elementary school level, throughout education. We weren't able to get a whole lot of teeth in it, unfortunately. Now, I believe Governor DeSantis has said he's going to withhold salary for those that actually violate their law on it. I will say I haven't talked to the governor recently. I believe it was maybe last week when I spoke with him about some of this stuff. I have talked to the AG's office because the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer in the state. Last week, they said they were just starting to look at it, and I told them they better start looking at it quick because a lot of schools are going to try and challenge this. I will say I did get a call back from someone at the AG's office this afternoon, but I haven't had a chance to return that call. So it is up to the AG to enforce the law and to issue a cease and desist order. I am looking at other things. I will say I have sent letters from my office directly to these districts telling them that they are in violation of the law, and if they don't follow the law, that there will be further legal action. So I am doing what I can from my position, trying to challenge that as well.
I've got a section for you that has teeth, so we'll talk after.
Okay. Peggy.
Continuing your discussion of 658. So far, Tulsa Public Schools, now the Oklahoma State Medical Association has filed suit against the governor and the state to institute mask mandates. I would tell you this, the only country that has actually studied, amazing, masks in children is Ireland. And they studied the effect and the effectiveness of using masks on school children. And they found they were not effective in stopping the spread of the disease, but they did find that they were effective in causing psychological and other problems. So that is an actual study, and it's against the law in the country of Ireland to mask a school child. So we need to be aware of that, and those studies are online. You can find them. There's information about them, and we need to get the word out that those studies do exist, because this is going to be one mean, nasty fight.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree.
So along the same line with the mask mandates and all this, I have several friends that are being threatened with their job if they don't get the vaccine. And it seems to me that there might be a way that, it seems to me if a company is going to force their employee to take this vaccine under threat of losing their ability to earn a living, then that company should also take the responsibility for any damage that that vaccine does to the individual. Is there any way that that can be put into Oklahoma law?
Yes, so I've been talking with Senator Bullard about some language that he has on that liability. We also have looked at the opposite perspective of that, in that saying that that if a business does not require vaccination, they can't be held liable for anybody that were to catch it, whether an employee or a customer, to provide that business that additional incentive, not just that stick, but that carrot, so to speak, of giving them those protections. So we're looking at liability issues on that. We're looking at it from a privacy perspective. There's several things that we're looking at. I recently read HIPAA, the federal law on it, and I feel like there might be some ways that we can do something in that, but I'm not ready to reveal that yet because I got to talk to some lawyers and the governor and the AG about some things like that. But I feel like there might be some ways that we can make sure to provide some protections. Because, I'm sorry? Yes, we've talked about workers' comp. We've talked about looking at it from that perspective as well. And some people will say, and I get this argument, well, it's the private property, it's the business owner, they should be able to do whatever they want on their property. Well, no, right now they can't discriminate against somebody based on race, sex, gender. There's several things that they can't discriminate, disability, that they can't discriminate against. Whenever you hire somebody, you can't ask them, hey, are you pregnant? You can't ask them, do you have HIV? You can't ask them, why can you now ask them, hey, have you been vaccinated? And why is it just specifically on this? So there are some things that, we don't have a true free market in this country anyways, and you shouldn't be able to just be able to tell your employee that they have to do whatever you say, right? This analogy does fit, but could you as an employer tell your employee they have to do certain favors to be able to continue to have that job? No, you can't do that. If you even say that to them, then they have a sexual harassment lawsuit against you, right? So why can they say that you have to get the vaccine, or why can they ask you if you have been vaccinated or not? So there's already some of those very similar, ways that we should be fighting this. Unfortunately, I know I'm going off on a tangent here. Let me say this. One. So what I'm trying to work on, having read HIPAA, and what I want to talk with the governor and the AG's office about, is I feel like we can do something. The governor can potentially do something through an executive order. I know that there are those who are wanting to do a special session. I'm on board with that. I'd be fine doing a special session. Special session usually costs about $100,000 to do that, but we have millions of CARES funds that have come in to deal with COVID, so we could use this money to potentially to cover that cost for it. It takes 6 days to do a special session to pass legislation. The Democrats have called for a special session to undo 658, so let them try while we try to do while we try to do more protections. So there are things that are being worked on, that are being discussed. Unfortunately, there isn't a set plan that everybody has coalesced behind of this is what we can do. We are trying to work together on it, but nothing has fully been solved. But let me go on my tangent real quick. So one of my issues that I have had with conservatives, with Republicans, is, and I've been saying this a lot lately, so many of them say, that's not the hill to die on. Have you heard somebody say that before, right? That's not the hill to die on. Well, the conservatives, the right, the Republican has been saying that for decades. And so what has the left been doing? They've been taking hill after hill after hill. You lose, so there's a famous Michael Jordan quote that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Well, you lose 100% of the battles you don't fight. And I'm not saying we have to fight every single battle, but we should be fighting more. And that's why I'm known as the guy that will fight every battle, because nobody else has been doing it. There's some other great conservatives up there now that have joined me with that. I'm thankful for that. But for so long it's been, well, we can't fight that battle. I'll give you a perfect example. With Biden. A couple days ago, he said that they didn't have the legal authority. He said they didn't have the legal authority to do the eviction moratorium extension. Then the next day they did it, and he said, yeah, it'll probably be fought in the courts, but at least we'll stall it for a month or two. You know what Republicans say at the Capitol all the time? Well, we can't ban abortion because the court will strike it down, so we won't even try. I mean, what if we were to actually pass a ban on abortion? And then, yes, it had to go through the courts, but maybe there was an abortion clinic that was shut down for a month or two. They're concerned about, this eviction moratorium for a couple months. How many babies could be saved for a month or two if Republicans actually tried, if they actually did it? But they just give up at the floor, and they're it's a foregone conclusion, the court's going to strike it down. The left doesn't do that. They'll fight all the time. So a lot of people say with this stuff, well, it's business owners, private property rights. We can't get engaged in this. No, this is a battle against the commie Marxists that are trying to take over every area of our life. It's time to fight back.
What can we do about officials and police who refuse to enforce the law? Rhonda mentioned Antifa and confrontations. I watched Antifa here in Tulsa tearing up the Woodland Hills Mall area, and even though our mayor had the National Guard sitting there, he let them tear up the shopping mall. He wouldn't do anything. And recently, in Portland, Oregon, Antifa went, attacked a church group, and threw all their equipment in the river, and the police just stood there and didn't do anything. These are the people that are supposed to protect us. If they don't do it, what's our recourse? We're not supposed to arm ourselves and enforce the law ourselves, but they're not leaving us much other options.
So our sheriff here in Tulsa County, Sheriff Regulato, he and I have had many good conversations about this. And we've talked about empowering the county sheriff to do more. And he's talked with other county sheriffs. I'm going to be talking to the County Sheriff's Association. But the sheriffs are the highest elected law enforcement officers in the county. They are very powerful. At least from a constitutional perspective. Statutorily here in Oklahoma, they don't have a whole lot of power. So I've talked with other people about expanding that power, and one thing that I'm looking at doing, I haven't filed this bill yet, so I haven't announced it, I will later, but I'm going to recreate the posse system and allow sheriffs to be able to deputize individuals, you know. I mean, some of these counties only have a couple of deputies, you know, for a huge county that they have to cover. And if they need to be able to call upon the citizens to deal with Antifa or other thugs or whatever, yes, have at it. Now, it's not just going to be willy-nilly. We'll put in some sort of training or some sort of stipulations or some of that stuff, you know, because we've had incidents here, even in Tulsa County, with the former sheriff where a high-powered donor of his was able to become a deputy and cost a life because of. So we don't want that, but we absolutely need to deal with it. So there are solutions, and that's one of them that I'm looking at. Larry?
Sorry. I have a two-part question regarding abortion. It's like you say, for the last year and a half, many good people have been focused on masks and vaccines. And meanwhile, hundreds or thousands of Oklahoma citizens, would-be citizens, have been murdered by abortion. So I got a two-part question. First of all, is regarding current Senate Bill 612. And the Tulsa 912 Project has a tradition of picking a couple of issues or several bills to be their top priorities for a legislative session. And I would propose that we consider making SB 612 our top priority for next year, because it's already, this is a bill that would go farther and restrict more abortions, save more babies than we've ever done before. Mm-hmm. And it's a bill that does have teeth. Somebody mentioned, a law that has no teeth in it. Senate Bill 612 does make the performance of an abortion a felony with a fine of up to $100,000 or imprisonment for up to 10 years. And a second little follow-up regarding Jim Olson's bill that he did get into law. And we haven't got 612 into law yet. But anyway, on SB 612, it has already passed the floor of the Senate. It's passed its House committee. All it needs is a vote on the floor of the House.
Correct.
And it is an active bill as the session starts next year. And so I was wondering if you'd help raise awareness of that bill a little bit. And I didn't talk with him beforehand, so maybe he's got a replacement bill or a floor amendment or something I don't know about. But I was wondering if you'd tell people about that and encourage people to support that. And then I had one quick question about Jim Olson's bill. Sure.
So yeah, on Senate Bill 612, that was my bill. Just so everybody understands, when he was saying there were those that were just focusing on masks and vaccines, not pro-life bills. I was doing pro-life bills as well. In fact, I actually had 4 pro-life bills. One of them did get signed into law by the governor. Our current law says that no state funds can go to Planned Parenthood. This would expand it and say no government funds, including city, county, or anything like that, because I guarantee you the People's Republic of Norman is going to try and give money to a Planned Parenthood clinic at some point in time. So that bill did get signed. But Senate Bill 612, you're right, it passed the Senate, passed House committee. I was working with Students for Life on that. Representative Olson is my House author on it. And for whatever reason, I don't know if games were being played or not, but the House ran out of time, is what I was told. They did pass several other pro-life bills, and Governor Stitt did sign all those pro-life bills, but you're right, Senate Bill 612 is the strongest pro-life bill that we currently have. So I've talked with Representative Olson. He says that he feels like that I don't want to put words in his mouth and say we have a commitment that it'll be heard right at the beginning of session, but he feels pretty strongly that we will be able to get that heard right at the beginning of next session and get that passed. So, and then you said you had a question on his other bill.
Yeah, was his HB 1102, whatever the number.
I don't remember the number.
He passed a bill that does not criminalize abortion, but it declares an abortion except to save the life of the mother or to prevent permanent profound disability or something for the mother. It makes it medical malpractice, and for which, if the medical board will investigate it and declare that to have occurred, he'd have his medical license suspended. And
Correct.
doctors don't like to have their medical license suspended. So I was wondering, I've never heard anybody talking about this. Should we maybe organize some volunteer committees to do some investigation? We're going to have to do some maybe standing on street corners in front of abortion clinics and interviewing young women, going in and gather some names and ask a few questions. A lot of people might not talk to us. Few people do. Only need one. If we could identify a woman who would tell us that she's not been diagnosed with a condition that she'll not be killed by her pregnancy or have a lifelong disability, and she goes and gets an abortion, then why couldn't we file, have an investigation done on these? I mean, should we be using the law that we have, such as this law, which is current law now? Is there a way that we can use that law to discourage abortions?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we need. If you remember, that was my bill in 2016 that we passed that Governor Fallon vetoed, was saying that if a doctor performed an abortion other than to save the life of the mother, that they would lose their license. Representative Olson did have to change it and add the permanent disability or a couple other things, but it would still eliminate 99% of abortions in the state of Oklahoma. But yes, we need people that would be able to find that. So that's a great idea. If there's those that are interested in doing that, that's something that would be very good to have organized, because there's only actually a handful. I think it might be under 6 abortionists in the state of Oklahoma. It's under 10. It's in the single digits how many doctors actually perform abortions in the state. So we start pulling their licenses, and other people aren't going to step up and start doing it if we can pull their licenses. So absolutely.
Nathan, we've seen what's going on down in Texas here recently with the arrest warrants for the 52 House members who left the state, fled to D.C. and other places, and very happy to see what's going on with the legislature down there, or with the House leadership standing up and calling for their arrest. What things do we have in place here to prevent that kind of walkout by Democrats here in the state of Oklahoma, and what would be done if that should happen, whether it's Senate or House in our legislature? What will we do?
So the Democrats in Oklahoma, the registered Democrats in Oklahoma, don't have enough of a majority to actually stop anything. If they left, we would still have a quorum and we'd still be able to pass it. I will say the legislature goes through different cycles. And so we have a 6-week period where all the Senate bills have to pass the Senate, and at the same time the House has to pass the House bills. That's what we do the first 6 weeks. On that final day of the 6 weeks, there actually was a Republican, in name only, but there was a Republican who actually was kind of quasi-filibustering. He wasn't filibustering, he was just asking tons of unnecessary questions, especially on several of my bills. He was asking, as a constitutional conservative, how can you take this position? Trying to do it in a derogatory way, and I explained logically how we can do that. I said, from his perspective, I don't know how he can't make that connection. We had a little bit of back and forth on it, but he was able to delay quite a few good conservative bills from being heard on the Senate floor. This is a Republican, stopping conservative Republican bills from going forward. And at the very end of the day, he actually, during one of the bills, he got up and debated and encouraged everybody to walk out so that I would not have the votes to pass my bill. So the problem isn't so much the Democrats here in Oklahoma, it's the Republicans who are not conservative, who are not constitutionalist, because there's more of those in the legislature than there are actual Republican conservatives. There's 48 senators. There are not 25 constitutional conservative Republican senators, even though 39 of them are Republicans of the 48. So we need more constitutional conservatives. I will say, since I've been in the legislature, this is the highest number of conservatives I've ever seen, and we are actually talking and working together because last year especially, I noticed that a lot of us were filing similar bills. And I was like, we don't all need to be filing. We need one person that we all need to get behind and push and find out who is best to carry that bill. So we actually did that a little bit more this year, kind of divvied up the workload and everything. So I didn't have to do it all myself. And so there was quite a few of those types of things that we were able to do. But the Democrats are pretty much a non-starter right now in the state. They're very inconsequential, other than they ask stupid questions on the floor. One of them, I kid you not, he's not in there anymore. He was there my first 2 years. He would get up And the first question he would always ask, he would get up and he would say, "Now, Senator, I haven't read the bill, but what I understand you to say is," he would say that every time. And I never did this, but I was very close to when I told people if he does it on my bill, what I'm going to say is, I'm going to say, "Mr. President, Mr. Presiding Officer, I ask that we lay this bill over so that the senator can do his job and read the bill so I don't have to read it to him." And we take the vote up. I never ended up having to do that. I was going to, but he didn't do it he didn't ask questions on my bill. He did my first year, but then I beat him down a couple times, and so he stopped asking questions on my bills. But I was hoping he would, but sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Great to see you again.
Good to see you.
So I was poking around on the GOP page, and I came across this religious exemption letter vaccine. Is that actually standing? Is this something that more people need to be made aware of to be able to utilize in their workplace?
So I've seen the letter, and I don't know that there's actually any legal standing for it as of yet. I don't know that it's actually been litigated through the courts. However, we do have under federal law, you cannot be targeted or fired or anything for religious reasons, right? That is one of the protected classes, along with age and sex and gender and those things, disability. So if you do tell your employer that you object on religious grounds and they fire you for that, then yes, you should have a very solid cause of action that a lawyer should be able to get you some sort of either reinstatement or severance package or something like that. However, the one thing I am telling everyone when they ask about their jobs and their positions, do not quit. Because if you quit, you have absolutely no recourse. Now, we are an at-will state here in Oklahoma. It's at-will employment. So an employer can fire you for something else that is not religious oriented or not because you refuse to take the vaccine. They could find another excuse. But if you have any sort of evidence to show that, no, it was really because you refused to take the vaccine on religious grounds, you still might have a case. It might be a little bit harder to prove that intent than if they specifically tell you, no, it's because you refused to take the vaccine. But if you tell them that religiously you object to it, you oppose to it, and they fire you, absolutely, you have pretty much a slam dunk case, a cause of action against them. So yes, I mean, I encourage people have that letter, use that letter. She said is it on the Tulsa GOP website or the OK GOP website? The OK GOP, but I'm sure you can find it online. On their website? Okay. Another question? Yes, ma'am.
Not only is Senator Dahm Rhonda's senator, but she has to share. He's my senator too.
That's true.
One of the topics that you were going to touch on is the McGirt ruling. And some may be aware in here, some maybe not. Last year it was McGirt v. Oklahoma in 2020 to overturn on where federal has jurisdiction and where state comes in. What are your thoughts on it?
So how many of you have heard of the McGirt decision with the Supreme Court? Okay, most of you. A couple haven't. So let me just summarize it very quickly. McGirt was found guilty in Oklahoma of raping a young child, a young girl. His lawyers appealed the case and said because he was a tribal member, it should not have gone through state court, even though it happened here in the state of Oklahoma. It should have gone through federal or tribal court. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court once again made an extremely terrible decision. And they said, well, because when Oklahoma became a state in 1907, they never really undid all of the reservations and everything else. Those are all still in effect, or at least should still be in effect. So basically, eastern Oklahoma, the 5 civilized tribes, Tulsa County, all this now falls under tribal jurisdiction to a degree, okay? Because that court decision dealt with criminal cases, they extend that jurisdiction solely to criminal cases. Now, I will say I've been in meetings where the tribes have said that applies to civil as well, and pretty much anything else that they want. And so there is a lot of gray area questions about what this does, because this will have long-term effects. We've already seen several other people that have challenged based on McGirt, where the statute of limitations has run out on the federal side, and so they couldn't be tried for what they were already convicted of under Oklahoma law, and so they would have to be released without a potential trial to correct those wrongs of the crimes that they committed. This also forces a lot of those. Essentially, any crime that takes place here in Oklahoma now, our law enforcement officers have been cross-deputized with the tribal deputies or the tribal police forces, and they have to ask every single person, are you a tribal member or not? Whether you're the victim or the perpetrator, they have to find that out. And if either one of those is a tribal member, then it has to get kicked over to federal court or to tribal court. The tribal courts only handle a few things, so most of it is getting offloaded onto the feds, who aren't really equipped to handle this because most all of this was handled at the state level. So there's a lot of things that are just falling through the cracks, a lot of, I don't want to call it petty crime, but smaller crimes and those types of things that aren't taking place now because the Supreme Court made this terrible decision, in my opinion. So it's going to have lasting impacts. I did just see today, I think there was a district court that did limit it and said that it should only apply to criminal cases, not to civil cases. So we'll see what that's going to do to change things. But I mean, there's questions of property taxes, there's questions of income tax, there's all kinds of questions, because the Constitution does say, excluding, Indians, not taxed. And so there are some things where tribal members are not taxed at the same level as citizens of Oklahoma and other states too, where they have tribes, obviously. So it is a very, very big, it is probably one of the biggest recent Supreme Court decisions that most people have never heard about. In fact, I've talked to other lawyers, other conservatives in other states that have no idea about it and the lasting impact on it. The solution, I don't know what's going to take place. It would pretty much take an act of Congress, and Congress is probably not going to act on it, or the Supreme Court making a different decision. I know there are other cases challenging it, working its way up through it, but let me go off on another little tangent here. When you think about most of the problems facing the country today, most of the things that we thought, would never have happened 10, 20 years ago, if you think longer ago, but you think about the major things that have changed our country, whether it's abortion, whether it's gay marriage with the Obergefell decision. If you look at most of these different things that we're facing now, McGirt, the Supreme Court is the one that caused this issue. If you read the Constitution, the Supreme Court, Article 3, is the smallest article of the entire Constitution. It was supposed to be very limited in scope and authority. In fact, it doesn't even say that there's supposed to be 9 Supreme Court justices. It says there shall be a Supreme Court. It says there shall be a Chief Justice, and it says such inferior courts as Congress shall from time to time ordain or establish. So Congress could eliminate the majority of the federal courts, the majority of the federal court system, if they wanted to and if they actually followed the Constitution. But most of these issues that we're facing, it's from these unelected judges who feel like they don't understand that they should be protecting people's rights either. And so it is the McGirt decision is a huge challenge for the state of Oklahoma. I will say the tribes, in my opinion, originally saw it as a huge opportunity, but now they're seeing the issues that are being faced with it, and so they would like some sort of a solution. Obviously, they want a solution that favors them more than anyone else. That's just human nature. But I feel like the tribes do also see that there needs to be a solution take place as well. The state wants to see it, but it's going to take the feds, whether that's Congress or the Supreme Court, to do something, and the feds are just incompetent right now. So I don't know what's going to happen with it, but it is going to be a major issue for years to come in Oklahoma. How are we doing on time? Okay. Another 15 minutes? All right. Yes, sir.
I had one question. There was a law that was trying to get passed last year that would bring more transparency to school board elections by moving them and aligning them with the general elections. That died in the vine somewhere. I'd like to find out, is that going to be reincarnated?
Yes. So That actually did pass the Senate. It was a pro tem speaker bill. So the leader of the Senate and the leader of the House both had that bill. Passed the Senate, but it got caught up in the crossfire and the negotiations and the personalities, and so it didn't go forward after it passed the Senate. I filed that bill 7 years ago. I've been supportive of it. I think we should consolidate all of our elections and have them at most 5 times a year. I would suggest March, June, August, and November. So, because you have a March presidential primary, you could move your February school board and your April municipal both to March, and then when you have a presidential election, it falls on that. You have your June primary, your August runoff, your November general. Something else that I'm supportive of, I filed bills for this as well, is actually having a November election every year, or at least having that option as a general election, and doing state questions on an off cycle, because we've all been in the ballot box where not only do we have 20 candidates, but we have 4 state questions in the primary, and then 6 in the general, or whatever the case might be, but moving those to a different time, so that you can focus on candidates one time and policy on another, maybe, or something like that. But still at that, that wouldn't increase that much, because people are used to voting in November. So I would like to see some sort of consolidation on that. Unfortunately, that bill didn't get through the House. It just went through the Senate. But I will tell you that is a priority for the Senate conservatives, and we are going to try and push and get that one through this next year.
I guess I had a question. This is what the underside of the bus looks like. Hey, Nathan, thanks for coming out.
Good to see you.
You probably know I'm going to ask this. I was in Washington, D.C. on January the 6th. The FBI-led Joint Terror Task Force sent 2 people to my office this summer and tried to make me the 533rd federal detainee on trumped-up charges. No pun was intended.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
But I'll take it. Right now, there are 4 Oklahomans awaiting sentencing on misdemeanors that may or may not even apply, that have been railroaded through a system that only exists right now because Nancy Pelosi and her ilk weaponized the Justice Department, politicized the intelligence community, and sent jackboots from 61st Street after everyone who went to D.C. 3 gentlemen from Muskogee are awaiting federal sentencing. 1 gal out of Oklahoma City lost her job and is awaiting sentencing. All they did was show up. All they did was come into the building when Capitol Police let us in.
Mm-hmm.
All they did was show up at their house on a business day during operating hours. What can we do? What can we help you do at the local level to stop this insanity before something has to escalate to stop it?
So I am working on a bill on that. I actually have a draft that I'd love to show you, get your input on. I will say this, at the state level, very few of the elected officials want to push back on the feds at all. Call it lack of spine, lack of back, whatever, cowardice, whatever you want to call it. Most of it goes down to money. They don't want to lose federal funds, because that's doing something. Spending that federal money is doing something. Yes, it's very disappointing. I've tracked a lot of that. How many of you have heard January 6th called an insurrection? Right? Did you know that there is actually federal law that you can be prosecuted for insurrection? It actually is in federal law. Do you know how many of those insurrectionists have been charged with insurrection? None of them. It was not an insurrection. One of the, not the Oklahomans, but one of the individuals that was charged, there was the evidence that the feds used was a video of this individual entering the Capitol and leaving. But you know what you can see in that video clearly? A Capitol police officer holding the door open for the individual. And yet they were still arrested and are in jail at this time. Because a Capitol Police officer held the door open for them and they entered the building. So yes, this is, these are political prisoners. This is the start of that. And yes, things could get a whole lot worse if people aren't made aware of it. So that's the first thing, is awareness, because there is a full-on propaganda media blitz. I mean, they're saying this is the worst day in the history of the American democracy. Well, we're not a democracy, we're a republic, but they're saying this is the worst day in our history, January 6th. They forget that, you know, actually back in the 70s and 80s that the leftists actually bombed the Capitol building. They forget about those types of, well, they don't forget about it, they ignore it, they bury that type of stuff. So yes, this is a huge issue that needs to be addressed, because when a political party starts taking political prisoners and detaining them indefinitely or arresting them for trumped up charges, that is a very, very slippery slope. And so there's not a whole lot we can do at the state level, but I like to come up with creative ideas, and I have a bill that I've worked on that I'd like to share with you and talk to you about that, get your thoughts on it, and I've been mulling over it, shared it with a couple people on it. Some people say it's a bad idea, some people say it's a good idea, but I think trying to defend people at any time is a good idea. So I'm just trying to decide if I need to tweak the language a little bit before I file it, but I'd be happy to share that with you. But mostly it's awareness. That's what people can do.
Okay. This Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week, there was a cyber symposium that many of you may have heard of or may not have. And what it revealed, it was Mike Lindell, who has, with the help of a lot of cyber nerds and Dr. Doug Frank, they have now ascertained that every state in the union was fraud. There was fraud in every state of the union. So it was massive fraud, and our machines were vulnerable. And I just wondered if Oklahoma will be conducting an audit. They had representatives there from from 49 different states. 50 today, thank God. And 50 today. And so I know one of the representatives, evidently from Oklahoma, was there. And but it showed a vulnerability for every state. I just thought I'd ask about audits.
Yes, so that's something I know Representative Sean Roberts has been talking with the Secretary of the Election Board on that. I've talked with Sean a little bit about that. The Secretary at this point in time is saying he doesn't want to do any sort of audit. He doesn't feel like we need it. State law currently just says that it's up to the Secretary's discretion. My bill that I filed last year didn't get a hearing, but I said no longer is it just up to his discretion, but that we would randomly do 3 audits chosen at random every election. So every June, they would have to pick a House race, a Senate race, a statewide race, or whatever, or a county race. I think I put in some parameters on it. One had to be at a county level, one had to be a legislative district, but it had to be picked at random, and they had to do an actual audit of the machines, of the paper ballots, to make sure that the counts matched and everything. That bill didn't get a hearing, but I've been trying to do that for a while now. But we need people to be making that more aware, because Oklahoma does have a pretty good system, but there are always, there's human error, or there's always possibilities of fraud. So, yes. Yes. So there's always those. So we are pushing for that. So that is being worked on. Can I close with something before I turn it over to you?
As far as the election integrity, one of the bills that they tried to get through last year, and we're going to really push for this year, has to do with the notary publics, because a lot where we lost to the Democrats would have been in the absentee ballots. We don't do mail-ins, we do absentee. It did not require a 2-person where you had to sign it and a notary had to sign it. You could just send a picture of your voter ID in, or your driver's license, and that counted because of COVID. So what we would like to see happen is we'd like to see that there be a log that notaries are required to to maintain during an election cycle. And because the notaries are only allowed to notarize 20 ballots. And so if we could maintain a log and have that turned into the election board so that in the event that there is an audit, they can confirm that me as a notary only notarized, 16 ballots, and they can go to those ballots and they can find them. So that's going to be another bill that's going to come up next year that we really need to get behind, because there can be a lot of fraud that's done if there's no way for them to check who's notarizing the ballots. So I think that's one thing that we can do regarding that. Another thing, speaking as the GOP chair, we need more notary publics. We need to have people that can be in the office so that we can do not drive by, but drive up. Yeah, that's right. Drive up notary, where people can come and it's easy for them to get a notary done. So it's not expensive. It's a very simple process. And if anybody's interested, I'll help walk you through the process. But we do need more notaries so that we can too jump on the absentee ballot bandwagon, because that's where we got our tails handed to us last year.
All right, so a couple of things. I have at the back table out there, I have pocket constitutions. That's the declaration. Is it still on? Okay. It has the declaration in it as well. So if you don't have one of those, grab them. I mean, you can get them, apps on your phone, but these are good, especially if you know a young person. Get it, give that to them. Also at the back, I have my sign-up sheet if you want to sign up if you're not getting my emails. But then I have these little magnets. It's a prayer magnet. You stick it on your fridge. It has my contact information on it, but it just says that you'll commit to pray one day a week. Even if I'm not your state senator, I will accept your prayers, and hopefully this will remind you to pray for your state senator, your representative, those who are in office. Paul told Timothy, we have a responsibility to pray for kings and all who are in authority, right? So hopefully that'll serve as a reminder. You just pick which day, or every time you see it, every time you go to the fridge, that can serve as a reminder for you. And along that line, I will say, I know several of you have asked what our next steps are. My wife and I have been... Say what? Oh, well, you didn't ask your question. Are we going to allow one more question for Rhonda?
Okay, Nathan, we know that you've been traveling across the state and making appearances here, there, and yonder, and we also know that there are a lot of open seats that are coming available in 2022. Is there a chance that you might be considering running for one of those seats, like Corporation Commissioner or something?
Okay, so yes, as we've been, I'm not saying corporation commissioner. I'm not saying corporation commissioner per se. My wife and I have been praying about that, and we do believe we will be on the ballot in 22. We've been praying for a while about which position that is, and we feel like we know which position it is as well. But we haven't announced yet, and so we are still. That's the main thing, is we're waiting on the timing. I've been serving for nine years. I'm term limited out now, so we have 12-year term limits in Oklahoma. I could potentially have 3 years left in the legislature. So I'm not going to run for a position just because there's an opening, or just because I have what's considered a free shot because I could be on the ballot in 22. I'm not going to do it for those reasons. I'm not going to do it for book sales or anything else like that. The only way that we're going to run for something is because we feel that that's the direction God wants us to go, where we can do the greatest good for the people of Oklahoma and for advancing his kingdom. So we are praying about that. So that's what I was going to say, is keep us in your prayers. Pray for us that we would know. Like I said, we believe we know the direction. We're just kind of waiting on the timing. And I know a lot of people say, well, you got to get out there. You want to be the first to announce. I will say this, the last time that I ran for something, other people had already announced, and a lot of people were telling me, you got to get in the congressional race because it's going to be a special election. Because everybody was saying Bridenstine's going to get appointed to NASA, it's going to be a special election, you got to be in it. I said, well, I prayed about it, and I don't believe it's going to be a special election. I'm not saying I was right and everybody else was wrong, okay? And obviously that election didn't necessarily go the way I wanted. It was a long race and everything. But the one thing I will say to everybody is, the elections are 10 and a half months away. candidate filing isn't even until April. When people ask me for my endorsement, because there's some good candidates that have already announced in some open seats where the people are term limited out. One candidate in particular, he contacted me and I told him, yes, you need to run. Yes, you would be great at it. No, I will not endorse you until after candidate filing and I know who all else is in the race. Yes, exactly. There was a state Senate race recently where 2 of my volunteers were both running for the same Senate seat. What if I had endorsed one before the other one announced? So you don't want to just jump into races so early on with this stuff. So you want to be wise with that stuff. So there's still a lot of time before those elections. Like I said, we've been praying about it. We feel like we kind of know some of that stuff. We're just kind of praying about the timing. But the other thing that I wanted to close with, and this is something else that I've been praying about more recently. You know, we talked about a lot of things tonight, and it could be very easy for people to kind of have a disappointed outlook on things. You know, things can look very dreary out there when we're seeing how hard the left is pushing, how much our country has changed. You know, the constant fear from the media and on TV about everything, whether it's this COVID stuff or the end of the world supposedly coming from climate change. There's just this constant fear out there, right? So we're all seeing that. And we've talked about a lot of those things. And yes, there are some things that we can address through the governmental sphere. There are some solutions to some of these problems. Being able to defend yourself with the county sheriffs and working with them. Being able to protect the lives of the unborn. We've talked about some actual solutions to these things. But one thing that I've seen more and more of is that people are looking for those eternal solutions, right? This is all temporary. This is all temporal. We're only on this earth for a short, limited amount of time. And yes, we should use that time as much as we can to better mankind, to serve other people. But I am a believer that there is true salvation, there is true peace, and there is true joy, and it's only found through Jesus Christ. That he came here as Savior for mankind. That none of us are perfect. I've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. But there's salvation through him. And we can achieve that salvation. C.S. Lewis, who was a wonderfully intelligent man, but also came to believe in Christ, said that if we find ourselves longing for something more, something spiritual, it can only be ascribed or determined because we are spiritual beings. And that's what we truly are. And so, and I'm paraphrasing him, but so one thing that I have determined is no matter where I speak going forward, yes, I'm going to talk about the Constitution, I'm going to talk about individual rights, but I just want everyone here to know that if you have those questions about eternity, about what a relationship with Jesus means, I'm not just talking about a religion, I'm talking about that relationship with him as your Lord and Savior. I will stay here as late as anybody wants to come and talk to me. Privately, you know, I don't want to embarrass anybody about that. I'll give you my phone number if you want to, you know, meet for coffee or have a phone conversation about it, because what we talked about, yeah, there's some solutions, there's some things that we can address, but that's the ultimate solution for everything that ails mankind. So if anybody is curious about that, you know, please come find me afterwards. I'll stick around. Of course, I'll answer questions on other things if people have other questions as well. But I just want to make sure that we are pointing to Jesus and focusing on the important things. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for coming out on a Thursday night. God bless you all. Thank you, Rhonda.
Appreciate you. You see why I'm so thrilled that he's my state senator? So real quick, so that we can mix and mingle, I wanted to remind everybody of the rally at the state capitol on Saturday at 3:00. And then also, I failed to mention our breakfast. We do a breakfast on the fourth Friday of every month at IHOP at 71st and Garnett. And our guest speaker this month is going to be Congressman Hearn. And I'm going to tell you that we packed the place out, and I know it's going to be packed out. So if you plan on going, the meeting starts at 7:30, but I would get there early, and I'd go ahead and eat if that's what you're planning on doing, because it's going to be very crowded, but it's going to be a very good meeting.